Got to tell you, my two fascinations are primarily technology, and I also love futurists. We've had any number of scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, inventors that are here talking about the future of their own inventions or what they project to be. I had Dr. Michio Kaku on the other day, one of the top scientists in the world. I think you take Stephen Hawking, you go on two notches, and Dr. Kaku is probably the top physicist in the world. And he was talking about things like in the relatively near future, we'll have computers of which we can put a chip in our brain and download our entire brains into the computer. And at a later date, if we need a memory or we need information, we simply upload it again. And for those that thought, well, that's one of those future things, but it's in the future, he pointed out that Stephen Hawking has a small chip in his frontal lobe. And if you ever notice on his glasses, he has a little square, kind of like Google glasses off to the right. Well, that chip communicates with that chip on his glasses, and via his brain, he is able to type his dissertations on the universe. That's the kind of thing I find absolutely fascinating. So on a regular basis, I read Futurist, and one of them is the Trends Journal. And this special report they have of a global wake-up call, 10 powerful transformational trends for this year. And Gerald Celente is the author and the owner and the publisher. Gerald, once again, good to have you on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Garland.
One of the things I read right before I started reading the 10 wake-up calls in depth, grim trend lines with glimmers. Make no mistake about it, a year of transformation lies. Talk to me about that.
Well, I've been at this since 1980, and I've never seen a year begin like this one or an old year end. And each year it seems to get worse. And I'm saying to myself, what's going on? Is this all in my head? And then I start reading the polls, and the polls confirm it. People are very pessimistic about the future. When I was a young man, I'm in my late 60s. The future was always better. We were going to do much better than our parents did. And you look at the polls now, whether it's college grads or people my age that can't retire because they have no money. And then you look around the world, and it's one country after another. The people haven't left the streets of Bangkok and other places around Thailand now for going on 3 months. Look at what's going on in Ukraine. Look what's going on in Venezuela, and Brazil, and Argentina. Of course, there's the South and North Sudan, and there's Central Africa. Not to forget Mali. Look at Syria and Bahrain. How about Libya? Go to Yemen, Egypt. I forgot about Egypt. Oh, Turkey. Look at what's going on in Turkey now. The lira now is at an all-time low against the dollar, and it looks like they're going to be overthrowing that government very shortly, the Erdogan government. And it's one after another. Oh, I forgot what's going on in Europe. They still they still don't call it a depression. That's right. You have 30% official unemployment rates in places like Greece and Spain. They call it a recession. You have youth unemployment from 40% in Italy to over 50% in places like Greece and Spain, very high also in Portugal and Ireland. And there's no way out. And now you see it heating up with Russia now responding to the overthrow of the government. Again, I'm a political atheist, by the way. I only look at things for the way they are and not, the way I like them or think they should be. So I'm not defending or taking sides on any of this. I'm just calling it what it is.
Let me ask you this. I've raised the same question as you. But one of the things I watch are the markets and those that invest in the markets. And I got newsletter from one of the people I really respect who's got a great track record. And he was talking about the Ukraine and how dangerous it is and how it could really affect the economy, how he thinks Russia will move at the very least on Western Ukraine and on and on. Then I hear what you're talking about, which is true. We've heard all the stories in Spain where the young people have no jobs, they're going to other countries, they have no hope. France in big trouble, their economy constantly going down. And then I'll talk to people, are you investing in the market? Oh, yeah, this year's going to be a big year. Then I'll look at the market's going up. Then I talk to friends of mine, you go in Spain, how was Spain? Spain was terrific. How about Venice? Oh, yeah. On one side, I hear what you're saying. On the other side, do you see any evidence that that's imminent?
Well, again, we have people in Europe, and for example, in Italy, business owners are killing themselves on the average like one every 2 days. And you look at the amount of people that can't leave their homes because they can't find jobs. And we have subscribers from around the world, and they keep telling us what's going on as they see things. So for a tourist, it's one thing. For the people living there, it's a very different thing.
But wouldn't the big market money people, the billionaires, the hedge fund operators, the political types be pulling out of the market? Can't they see what you see and what I think I see when I do the show, which is virtually the same thing you see? Wouldn't the big boys with the power and the money be pulling out of the market?
Not at all, because it's a disconnect. And the disconnect is this. The markets are being driven by all the cheap money that's going into them. Even with the Fed pulling back on their stimulus, they're still pumping in, $65 billion a month? And the same thing is going on in China, and the same thing is going on in the European Union. So what happens is the banks and financiers could borrow the money really cheaply, and it keeps the speculation going. So it's a very big disconnect. For example, as you probably well know, the gap between the rich and the poor in the United States is now the widest of any industrialized nations. Yeah. When you look at the gains that have come since the Panic of '08, 95% of that money has gone to the 1%. If we were to have this conversation, by the way, let's say 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, what do I got, a Marxist or a communist on the phone over here talking about this? And now, of course, you go to CNBC, and they'll be talking about the same thing. You have 400 people in the United States, 400 people that are worth $2 trillion. That's bigger than the GDP of Italy, bigger than the GDP of Canada, of Mexico. You have, I believe it's like 385 billionaires around the world that are in control of half of all the assets in the world. So, and when you mention about France, the new numbers just came out again today. Their unemployment numbers are way up at all-time highs since post-World War II. So it's a disconnect. It's two very different worlds.
All right, let me take a break here. When we come back, we obviously can't steal enough of your time to go through all 10, but when we come back, I want to touch on one of your trends for 2014. Populism is powerful, power of the people, and it's growing, but not everywhere. The U.S. is too passive and controlled to take part in the global trend. That and more coming up next. WWL, Big 870 AM, 105.3 FM. All right, welcome back to the Think Tank. As usual, I'm always fascinated by people that study today in order to better understand what may be in the future. One of them that I follow is Trends Journal, Gerald Calente's Trends Journal. And he's got a special report called A Global Wake-Up Call, 10 Powerful Transformational Trends for 2014. Gerald, I'm looking at, looks like number 5. Populism is powerful and growing, but not everywhere. The U.S. is too passive in control to take part in the global trend. Explain.
Well, again, look what's going on around the world. You have the pitchfork demonstrations going on throughout Italy. You mentioned the indignados in Spain. You look at what's going on in Greece continually. As we all see the protests in Ukraine, the ones in Venezuela, what's going on in Thailand, on and on. And where's any protests in the United States? And I have to tell you, one of the levels of hypocrisy that just blows me away are listening to the Assistant Secretary of State, Victoria Nuland, and others, and this guy Marco Rubio talking about Venezuela, as well as Cruz, Ted Cruz, talking about how wonderful it is these people are protesting, and Nuland, of course, talking about Ukraine, as Kerry and the Obama administration, and you can't protest in this country. I mean, I'm a New Yorker. I was in this Occupy we were down Occupy Wall Street. You get out of line, they'll break your head open. And this is from today's New York Times. Justice rule against man over zone for protests. This is a guy that they have banned from going to Vandenberg Air Force Base, where they have a protest zone. You're allowed to go in the protest zone. But this guy's not allowed to go in the protest zone because they banned him from the protest zone. I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean, everybody sees what's been going on lately, how the militarization of the police in this country. I mean, again, I'm not a kid. I've been around a long time. I remember as a kid in the Bronx, when the cops used to go by, little kids, would yell out, what are pennies made out of? And my buddy would yell out, dirty copper. Now they beat the hell out of you for that. I mean, so, no, there's no protest in this country. You better stay in line. You have NSA watching everything that you're doing. Oh, now the Obama administration said we're going to hold on to telephone records longer than we had said before. Who made this up that these people have the right to watch and listen to anything that we do? And by the way, Garland, I don't need some clown in a black suit, we'll call it a robe, telling me how to interpret the Fourth Amendment. I'm an intelligent guy, I could read. So they robbed us of all our rights. Here's a freedom of speech issue over here with this new Supreme Court ruling, and not even addressed. So, no, you don't have anything going on in the United States. You better stay in line.
What do you say to the people that say, when it comes to the revelations about NSA and Google and Facebook and tracking of retail and apps that can track us, and you hear it all the time, well, I'm not worried about that. I haven't done anything wrong.
Well, that's them. As I look at it, there are 80% of the people, you could take them either way. They'll follow anything. And then there's the 10% destroyers and the 10% builders. And right now we have the 10% destroyers destroying. To me, where is their pride, dignity, and self-respect? Hey, let's make it fair. Let's level the playing field. If they could watch us, let us watch them. If they could listen to our records and watch us, let us. I want to see what every one of those gang of 535. That's how many senators and congressmen there are. I want to see everything that they do. I want to see because after all, every election they roll out this line. We're public servants. Oh, you're a public servant? Okay, here, get this straight. Besides cleaning my toilets, being that you're working for us, I want to see what you're doing. I want to see everything that you're doing. How about that?
You know the answer to that one. Not going to happen.
Why not? Because and by the way, as I said, I'm a political atheist. I am totally I began my career as a young man. I used to run political campaigns in Westchester County, which was the richest county in the U.S. at the time, and was the assistant to the Secretary of the New York State Senate. I spent several years in Washington, D.C. as one of the chief government affairs specialists of the chemical industry. One of the contributors to our magazine, the Trends Journal, is Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, a former assistant Treasury Secretary under Reagan. We're a bunch of guys that have been there and know what it looks like. Why can't it change? You know who's running the country? The same people you couldn't stand in high school and college that wanted to be class president and head of the student council.
I'm reluctant to get into this one, but let's do a little bit of it and come back. We're going to have to break for news in about a minute. Then I'll only have you for about 10 minutes after that. But I pride myself in being the older generation that if I'm not an expert in computer, I'm certainly interested and I'm trying everything in sight, and I like it. And I like what young people are bringing to the table with their technology and entrepreneurism. One of the 10 things you see in the future, older adults coming of age in the social media, right?
That's right.
In what ways?
In what way?
Give me one, and then we'll come back and talk about more.
Well, what you're going to start seeing is just how you mentioned. So many of the younger people they have their networks of and what they do. You're going to start seeing the baby boom generation and older start creating their networks. A new AARP, for example, because they're not appealing to anyone. So those kind of things start to happen.
Very interesting. Before we break, one quick question kind of away from this. I hear criticisms of the millennials on a fairly regular basis. I like this new generation, don't you? To me, they look more entrepreneurial, more they can do it on their own. They're not looking for government. They're not looking for the handout. They kind of remind me of the great generation. How about you?
Yeah, in some aspects, what they lack is they lack a point of reference in the sense that they don't know what was. And they have, the Renaissance, it was a rebirth. Alla Romana, alla Antica, in the manner of the Romans and the ancients to describe the quality of the work. They've only seen one America. They don't know the other America. It's like looking at those pictures of decaying Detroit. And you see the grandness of what the city used to be, the level of architecture, craftsmanship, and care. They don't see it. They grew up at a time when they thought Walmart's was our whole lives. Big box stores. It's like going into a self-storage unit to go do shopping. So they don't have a point of reference. And that really limits them in a lot of ways. They think that now is always.
Well, I'm still in their camp. I think they'll have the ability to look back at history and learn from it. But when we come back, let's go back to older adults come of age in the social media. Quick break for the news. Dave Cohen, a news director, and we'll be right back. Let's take a little look into the future. We're talking to Gerald Celente. He is the publisher of Trends Journal, a global wake-up call, 10 powerful trends for 2014. Gerald, before we took a break, we were talking about older adults coming of age in the social media. What do you mean?
Well, again, it's a social media as well as coming of age themselves. There was a story I went over the wire a couple of days ago about Jane Fonda, and she's like 76 or something. She feels the end is near. And what we did in the Trends Journal is we showed how when you start getting to this age, it's a new age that's really beginning because you've been around long enough to know enough. And, again, speaking only for myself, I had these different times in my life when, you start changing. 28, I realized I'm not a kid anymore. Around 30, I mentioned I used to work in the chemical industry. Around 33, I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And I began the Trends Research Institute. And then when you get, you get to another certain age, you say, look, I know this story now. I know enough where have I really been doing what I really want to do? And that's what a lot of people are finding out because a lot of people at that 33, 34-year-old juncture, they settled for security. And maybe they didn't really do what they wanted to do. Well, now there is no security. And you have a lot of baby boomers that have lost their jobs and they can't find new ones. So now they're creating their own future. And this is really big because they have behind them the knowledge. And we have a story in here about Stanley Blum. This guy's 94 years old. And this guy's spry as a kitten. And I'm not exaggerating. He began painting and writing books at 80. He used to be a shoe salesman. And he said, all those years were lost years for him because he never had the courage to break out and become himself. So what the social media does, it starts building those connections among other people to show them that the future is just beginning. And not to, I'm old. I look, when I was a young guy, I remember watching Johnny Carson, and they used to say, life was over at 40. There was that mindset. And so now it's a new mindset that, the baby boomers are still becoming babies in a lot of ways, in the sense that they have a whole future in front of them. How could they make the best of it and really bring out the talents that they've honed over the years?
How do you think that's going to balance out in the future with the millennials that a lot of them have the education, no job, and big debt?
This is a huge issue, and it again, I'd love to go into it with detail with you, because I'm a believer that there are solutions. So the question I throw back to anyone that asks this is, I said, when did it work better? And I can tell you when it worked better. When we had laws in place, like the Robinson-Patman Act, Sherman Antitrust Act, Clayton Antitrust Act, where you didn't have to get a degree in learning how to stock shelves and ship packages, because there were mom-and-pop stores, and they prohibited the bigs from grabbing everything at the turn of the 18th to 19th to 20th century, where they try to stop the robber barons from robbing everything. And now they're robbing it under a different name, hedge funds, private equity groups. And it's a multinational takeover. So you have to put back into place laws that were put in place by people like Teddy Roosevelt and others, and the Glass-Steagall Act, which was ripped apart under the Clinton administration, that will give the entrepreneur an opportunity again in this country. And you have to put tariffs back up. And that's not being protectionism. It's saying, look, how about made in America? I mean, what, are we too stupid to make clothes? Or we can't make shoes? I'm up here in Colonial Kingston, New York, 2 hours north of New York City. And right above us, used to be Gloversville. They used to make, IBM used to be here. The shoe factories were all upstate New York. And now it's desolate. So, in the upper reaches up here. So why did it happen, and who has it benefited? There's a story today breaking over the wire. Blackstone or BlackRock, or one of the black groups of these black investor groups. I say black in the sense of dark. Equity funds or private equity groups, investor groups, hedge funds, they're buying 10% or 20% of Versace. Oh, great. And you look at every one. They're not owned by companies anymore, by families anymore, or by the stockholders. They're owned by private equity groups. So the only way the millennials will have a shot at the future is if we bring the past back. So I'm all in favor of a restoration of America, to bring the country back to the greatness that it was. Oh, another easy one. Hey, today, Kerry came out, the Secretary of State, and said, America's becoming isolationism. Oh, yeah? Hey, could anybody figure this one out? How about what George Washington said? How about what Benjamin Franklin? How about what Jefferson? And how about Adams and the rest said? No foreign entanglements. Oh, no, I'm John Kerry. I'm Ted Cruz. I'm this one. I'm that one. I know better than Washington and Franklin. Hey, Washington only led the charge, the revolution. The guy was a general, fought in the battles. Are you going to tell him no foreign entanglements? Who made this up? So we could become a great country again if we go back to the principles, I believe, upon which the nation was founded. I am an American. I believe in the principles of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the foundation upon which the nation has been built upon that has been destroyed.
Another trend you're predicting, wake-up call confronting the abuse of power head-on. What do you mean?
Well, again, it's the wake-up call is that, you can see what's going on around the world. Governments are toppling. We have people at the head telling, one of the things I came up with, Garland, a few days ago, why is it that so few could rule and ruin the lives of so many, while so many let so few rule and ruin their lives? You look at the clowns that they call senators and congressmen and commanders in chief that we've had over the years. And I don't say that in a sarcastic way. I say it in a factual way. And I go, hey, you want to freak out? Let's go over the fiscal cliff. No. Let's hit the debt ceiling. Now I got a better one for you. How about the war on drugs? No, I got a better idea. Let's legalize marijuana, and now we can all make a lot of dough off it by getting taxes from it. And forget all those people we threw in jail and the trillions we spent on it. How about, I got it, Obamacare. You can't even get the computer site to work, the website to work. It's one failure after another. Now they're talking about pulling out of Afghanistan. Brilliant. Great war. Longest in American history. Between that and the Iraq War, they're estimating $6 trillion. Million people killed when you add up both. Our soldiers wounded, many of them for life, and of course the dead. And for what? And who did this? So to me, that's the wake-up call, is that people better wake up and understand that if they don't take the future into their own hands, you got some sociopaths and psychopaths out there that are going to get your future the way they want it and not the way you want it.
Can we, and this doesn't talk about any of the trends itself, but can we keep going the way we're going? And that sounds like a very broad question, which it is. But over the years, over the last 5 years, I guess a lot after Katrina, I have thought, and our little staff discusses it on a regular basis, how long can this economy keep going? How long can the world keep having governments collapse with nothing to replace it? Do you see a point where we just keep chugging along, or does this come to a head, or does it get a whole lot better?
It keeps getting worse if we keep taking the current course. Look who's in charge of the money printing and money supply. A private operation, the Federal Reserve. It's not, as people know, it's as Federal as Federal Express. And then you look back, they wait 5 years to release the minutes. Isn't that wonderful in a transparent government? We'll wait 5 years so everybody could forget what really happened back then. So now they release the numbers, the pages, 2,000 pages of Fed minutes going back for when the Panic of '08 began. And anybody, if they want to take the time, they could read the incompetence, or they could read the summaries from other news sources that wrote about them. They didn't have a clue what was going on. They didn't have a clue. You have Janet Yellen, who's now the new Fed chair, and she was saying early on, there may be trouble. And then in April of 2008, we're going to see strong economic growth in the next quarter coming up, and the worst is over. And one after another. Timothy Geithner, then the Fed president of New York Fed president. One after another, they got it wrong. We have people that are incompetent making important decisions, whether it's in finance, whether it's in politics, regardless of the area, that are out of their league. So if we keep going in the current direction, we can see the future. The only way it's going to change, as I believe, again, is if I were president, the first thing I do? I close down Congress and the Senate for 2 years. We don't need any more laws. And who made up this term, lawmakers? Lawmakers. How about going out and getting a job?
Gerald, I kept you longer than I said I would, and we've got to take a break. Thank you so much. Always good to talk to you.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Colin.
Gerald Celente, and it's called the Trends Journal, a global wake-up call, 10 powerful trends for 2014. Dabba-dabba-ya, 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 dabba-dabba.